to the Photography Pod, a show for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. And here's your hosts, Steve Vaughan and Nick Church.
Hello again and welcome to the Photography Pod. And as the jingle said, in fact my wife said, this is a photography podcast aimed at both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. Thank you to Samantha Vaughan for the jingle. My name's Steve Vaughan and I'm joined here once again with my good mate Nick Church. How you doing, Nick?
Very well, thanks, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, bit knackered, if I can use that phrase.
Oh,
That's probably just made the podcast expletive already. But yeah, it's been a busy few weeks, yeah?
It always is, isn't it? This time of year is just it's always a nightmare. It's when for any wedding photographers around, that's when the wedding editing and still shooting weddings just sort of collapses into one massive heap of trying to take the same amount.
So go on, tell me, you're going to tell me you've edited all your weddings now and you're up to date? Is that right?
I'm not far off, actually.
Oh,
I've got about three or four to do, which is pretty good for me. I mean, this time of year, I'm often double figures still. So, but we're off on a holiday next week. So I kind of want to, that feeling of you just want to get stuff wrapped up before you go. So I really want to get that done.
Completely. Where are you off to?
Sicily.
Oh, nice.
Syracuse. Yeah. So we're really looking forward to that. Hopefully it'll still be nice and warm.
Wasn't that something to do with Archimedes in the last Indiana Jones film, which was Pants? Anyway, it's probably another story. Yeah. Syracuse, yeah.
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Time travel.
And it was in, I think it was one of the James Bond films as well.
Okay.
But that's what I know about Sicily, apart from the Mount Etna and the Mafia. So hopefully I'll see one of those.
I've got a mate I play golf with, actually. He comes from Sicily originally. He's like a Sicilian mountain goat. He's about 5'5" and climbs up everything as if he's literally a mountain goat, but that's another story. So my wife's off on holiday next week, but I'm not. She's off to Florida. So we've got a couple of weeks without weddings, and we've got best friends in the States from when we used to live there a number of years ago with my work at the time, and they've retired to Florida now. So apart from the flight, we've always got like a free holiday, apart from plenty of booze and food, of course. But
does that extend to your friends and podcast co-hosts and things like that?
Yeah, well, why not? Yeah, see what we can do. It's in Fort Myers, so it's sort of on the Gulf Coast. But I'm not going. I've got to stop and look after her dogs. So unfortunately, they don't fly very well.
No,
that didn't work out. I'm going to have a couple of days walking. Actually, I booked a cottage up in Derbyshire for a couple of days and do a bit of walking while I've got no weddings.
Great idea.
Yeah, up to my neck in mud. Is it still raining your way? Because it hasn't stopped raining here for what seems like a millennia.
No, it seems all right at the moment. It's the last couple of days. It's been okay. Went for a good cycle last night.
All right. No, it's still raining here.
Yeah. But I've been in a rabbit hole of buying and returning earbuds. So that's been a fairly hefty chunk of my week. So it made me think, right, that I got some Sony earbuds.
All right.
Which were 200 quid. So they're pretty, it's a lot of money to drop on them. They went wrong. And also my Beats Flex that I use for when I'm on my bike as well went wrong in the same week. And they're both just outside the warranty period. And I just see, I don't want people to think they've tuned into like a Joe Rogan podcast, because to be clear, this is the Photography Pod with Nick Church and Steve Vaughan.
And we have more listeners than him as well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And we believe the Earth's round, crucially. But it made me think, like, so I used to work in the TV industry, so TV software.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a unspoken but well understood thing that there was planned obsolescence in TV. So a lot of the TV manufacturers, who I won't name, they don't explicitly put in obsolescence to make the sets go wrong. They can't put any hardware timers or software algorithms which are monitoring time that just stop working after a certain amount of time. But when they do things like planning, let's say they're choosing a backlight, LED backlight for a TV, they could choose one that's going to last 3 or 4 years or one that's going to last 50 years. Now, clearly they're going to go for the former because that's how their business keeps going, is by people renewing their TV sets. So it does happen. And it makes me think, are these firmware updates, when we're agreeing to firmware updates, is that part of it? That you are kind of basically signing up to having your device stop working after a while.
That's fascinating, yeah. Because, the Sony just did an update for a number of their cameras, which they had to withdraw, I noticed, because it was bricking the camera. I remember Fujifilm doing that a while ago when we used to use Fuji as well. You're far too young to remember this, but way back in the year 2000, everybody was terrified of the Millennium Bug.
I remember that.
Yeah, and the fact that computers were going to spontaneously combust when they got to the year 2000. And I was working for a software instrument company at the time, and there was a big worry that all the instruments that we made had got this bug built in, and a lot of them were being used in things like nuclear power stations and petrochemical sites and things like that. So I got paid triple time to sit in the office on New Year's Eve to waiting for all these phone calls to come in. And of course, we didn't get a single call. So planned obsolescence perhaps isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah,
but,
maybe.
Maybe.
But it's the same with your, like, and I was thinking with my, because I need a new PC at some point, a new Mac.
Okay.
Lightroom's getting slower and slower. And why is that? Why is the same functionality? I can understand why AI features and the higher, stuff that needs more power, like number crunching, is gonna be more taxing. Why is the stuff that's just like using the library module, for example, why is that getting slower and slower as time goes on?
That's a really good question. Yeah,
but it wouldn't make sense for them to do that unless, that's where you would really get into conspiracy, because Adobe wouldn't benefit from poorer performance unless there was some collaboration with Intel and Apple, which that definitely is Joe Rogan territory if we're going down that route.
Let's not go down this route much further, otherwise we'll be talking about aliens and UFOs and poltergeists and all that kind of stuff, because we've got a guest sitting here wondering what the hell he's doing probably right now. So, so why don't you introduce our guest this week, Nick?
Yeah, our guest this week is a good pal of mine, Geraint Roberts. And Geraint is a wedding photographer based in South Wales, in Cardiff now, right? Newport. I'm lucky. That makes people think, how good a friend is he? But you have just moved, so it's not like I just didn't know where you lived. And Geraint, interestingly, went to university with Guy Peterson, who we had on 2 episodes ago. So that's how I met Guy, through Geraint. So Geraint and I've worked together an awful lot of times, both on film and photography, and we've had lots of nights in the pub and gone out for meals. And so what is really interesting about Geraint is that there's 2 things. He's very much into analog film. So he obviously shoots digital, he shoots, we'll ask Geraint to talk about this in a moment, but has got an interest in film as well. He's also, annoyingly, probably the loveliest man in wedding photography. And you see this because whenever we go to a venue, the venue staff are over the moon that he's arrived. They go, "Oh, Geraint's here." And I think, well, what about me? I'm here as well. But they don't seem to have the same reaction. So you must be doing something right. Geraint, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to give a bit of a background on your kind of journey through photography, what you do and that kind of thing?
Yeah, of course. So I started photography when I was quite young, really. Would go down the local skate park on a BMX and on my scooter. I was absolutely awful at it, kept falling off. But what I was quite good at was taking photos of the other people. And I was just doing it on my phone at the time. One of the guys said to me, "Oh, you should really, consider getting a camera." So kind of went from there. This was like age 12, 13. I remember selling, I had it must have been brand new at the time, the iPad, selling my iPad to buy my first camera, which was a little Sony NEX5N.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It still works now as well. But yeah, after that kind of got published, really. And that was really like a little break for me, really, when I was quite young, in a skate magazine. One thing led to another, and everyone kind of knew I was passionate about photography. And ended up photographing a teacher's wedding when I was in 6th form. And it kind of just spiraled from there, really. There's loads and loads of weddings throughout 2016, 17, 18, and 19, then COVID. But Nick helped me along my journey as well. So I met Nick in 2018, I think it was now. And
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, kind of took me under his wing as such. And I learned quite a lot through him as well. And yeah, kind of alongside grew my own business, and it's my full-time job. So yeah, it's been good.
And you did that alongside studying, right? So you were down at Falmouth University studying marine biology and photography. Have I got that right?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah,
so you were doing that because you were in your final, or going into your final year, I think, when we first met, but you were still shooting tons of weddings and going, you didn't seem to have any worry about going down to Cornwall, coming back for a wedding in Pembrokeshire, going back the night before, the next night. So how did you manage to juggle those 2 things?
Yeah, I'm not sure I did manage to juggle the both of them, actually. It was, at the time, really, I would take on every single opportunity I could get. And I think, looking back now, I'm glad I did as well. Registering to be self-employed when I was in my second year of uni, that actually came in really handy during COVID, because I'd actually made the grant deadline to be able to get like the SICE grants and stuff during COVID, which was really fortunate, which I only see in retrospect. And having, building those foundations whilst I was in uni, by the time I graduated, I already had like a fairly established business. So yeah, I think it put me at a good advantage when I left. But yeah, I was up and down the M5 and M4 pretty much every weekend.
I know. I couldn't believe it.
My poor car.
Yeah, that poor Golf.
Yeah. The Golf broke after 160,000 miles, so rest in peace.
What's your with studying at university? I don't know if you've seen on the Photography Pod Facebook group and the Nick Church Photography Collective one as well. There's been questions around someone asking, should they study photography at university? Is something that's beneficial. Now, my view is that it doesn't make any difference. However, I think people that have studied photography do have a deeper understanding and have got more knowledge around more of the technical aspects or the history of photography. How would you say, what are the pros and cons of from your point of view?
I'd say our course was so niche that it was almost, you would end up going into like the BBC wildlife department, or you'd work with some kind of wildlife agency or charity. A guy who you interviewed went off on a very documentary approach about, the ethics of wildlife. I kind of went on, how can I go on a holiday really sort of aspect from it, which kind of took me to Japan in my third year, my dissertation project. And that was kind of what I wanted to do with it. I went into uni as well. I remember going to the interview and saying to the lecturer, I was like, I think I'll probably end up doing wedding photography at the end of it, but I really love wildlife. Like I did an A-level in biology. I've always been passionate about environmental things, So for me, it was a very logical course. Whether it's a general BA course, though, that's a different question, because I think a general BA in photography teaches you more like a fine art background. It's, the theory, the history. Don't get me wrong, you still learn fantastic technical skills, which I still apply now. And it was the time to create and to experiment with different ideas, use things like the film labs, which we had in uni. We could develop our own film, we could process it, we had enlargers, scanners. It was a fantastic resource, and that really opened a new avenue for me. Whether it's up to you to do a degree, now student loans are a lot higher, like you do have more money for them. I realize I probably got a better deal when I was in uni, and you can learn a lot more stuff online now as well. If it was the same situation though, and it was the same fees, the same, I really enjoyed uni, I'd go back and do it all over again. But I don't know that I'd pay the current fees.
Yeah, I've got a couple of kids who've been through university, and one did a second degree as well. So, they've all got good jobs, thankfully, but there's that loan that's going to be hanging over them for a long time. Falmouth seems to come up a lot, actually. It seems to be advertised a lot on like Facebook and Threads. Is it somewhere that's particularly focused, if you pardon the pun, on photography, or is it just because it was local to where you lived at the time?
So yeah, Falmouth is probably one of the UK's best arts unis in terms of it only really offers arts courses, right. And the photography department there was one of their biggest departments. They spent, I literally think, millions on the resources we had. I remember when the Sony A9 came out, we had it like within the first week. All the latest kit was there. They spent thousands on diving equipment, underwater camera housings, which are very expensive. So it's photography department wise, fantastic. Really
amazing. Yeah.
Because
I'm a scientist, and I spent many years selling scientific equipment to universities, amongst other places. So it's a university I don't know, and I guess that's why really they need arts courses. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we
shared the campus with Exeter University. I don't know if you'd done that, but it was a good amalgamation of both students.
But that's the thing, I guess. Now, for someone deciding, making that decision now, that like when I went to university, when Steve went to university, your sort of the position you were in, Geraint, where you were thinking, well, I would like to learn, I'm really interested in the things that are being taught at the university, use the resource. That would almost be a no-brainer, wouldn't it, right, Steve? Because it wouldn't cost anything. You could carry on doing it. But now when you're looking at, well, that's going to be like 10 grand a year, in tuition fees. That's quite that is quite an investment.
It's about to go up as well, because universities are struggling for funds, aren't they? Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the funding I find comes from international students as well, because the fees are less regulated. So I think when I was there, it was like 9,000 if you're a UK student. It was something like 15,000 if you're a EU or, another country student, which, it's interesting the different kind of what unis are going for funding wise. So
interesting.
So it sounds like there is the benefits are there that you've got access to a network of people that are passionate about photography, and you've got resources that you wouldn't have otherwise, and techniques and all those sorts of things that you just wouldn't find otherwise. But in terms of a photographer that's right, they want to set up a studio as a career, then I would suspect probably less so. Is that fair? Less benefit?
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on if you're willing to teach yourself and you're willing to really show up for yourself, learn online, take some good courses and just get out there and experiment, and having the time to do that, I'd say, you don't need a photography degree. But if you, want the social aspects, you need access to some equipment that you couldn't maybe afford normally yourself. And just having the time to put discussions around with people. Like it's great that I'm still in a position to be able to talk with you guys and be able to speak about different photography things and ideas that I have. But at the time I didn't know as many people. So it was nice to make friends on my course, like Guy, my friend Ty. We'd sit around and talk about, we'd bore people to death with camera talk. I remember one of my housemates, she had like a headache. She was like, you've said F this and did that, and I don't understand. We talked for hours about random camera stuff.
Let's not try and do that to the listener on the podcast.
But it just helped us grow. So yeah,
absolutely, yeah. So when we chatted about this interview beforehand, Nick and I, and Nick said, "Will you talk to the guest about the film side of things, because you'll understand it because you're much older than me," which is true. So is that how you get into the film side of things then, in all seriousness? It was just through your degree and being exposed, again, part of the pun, to sorry, I didn't mean to do that, to enlargers and developing trays and all that kind of thing. Is that where the interest started?
Yeah, it was really strange. When I was little, my parents never bought like a digital camera or anything. They always had a little Canon Sure Shot. It was like a little point and shoot film camera. And since I was little, I always remember carrying that around, taking little snaps on it, going to Legoland with it. So I've always liked having a little film camera. That's kind of what I was used to. And it was only then, as I got, grew up and bought my own camera, that little Sony, that I kind of worked with digital, then came back to it in uni. So it's, at the time, it was great because you didn't have to pay for any developing, all the skills free of charge. I could go out and shoot a roll of film from Poundland and then have that developed in uni for free. And it was great. And that for me really allowed me to like experiment and just, kind of see what I liked and what I didn't. They had really nice film cameras, Hasselblads, Bronicas, just fantastic resources. So yeah, I'd say the film photography, like I learnt the core element of that. But then over lockdown, when, I had time to just reflect and sit down on stuff, was really when I learnt about applying that within wedding photography. And different photographers, especially in the States, that use particular film cameras that I love, a Contact 645. And yeah, for me, that was a really good experience, kind of sit down, reflect on things, apply it in a business sense.
So I think we'll explore the techie side of film photography in a bit, because I'm dying to do that, because that's where I started. But
reminisce,
But from a business point of view, then with you as a wedding photographer, I was at a wedding fair on Sunday, and I think there were 5 wedding photographers there. And every week there's another new wedding photographer or another 10 wedding photographers. So from a business and marketing point of view, how does the film side of things impact your business? How does it differentiate you, I guess is the question. If it does.
Yeah. I've had people on the inquiry form say that we love the filmic look of your images. It's not so much of a thing that I market as a film photographer as such.
Okay.
But it's more that it influences the style of photography that I like to do at the palette. I'm trying to shoot a roll of film at each wedding, and then I've almost got like a baseline to know my edit to compare to. So
Right.
it saves me time in that sense, that I know, oh, this is how it looked on film, which is quite like a realistic account of how it looked. And then
And looking at your work, I can see exactly what you mean in terms of that sort of filmic look to your editing. It's something which I love, because one of the challenges, and certainly with the Sonys, we all use Sony cameras. They all look very digital and very sharp, and straight out the hood, don't they? So when you talk to prospective couples, if I could say that, do you say, I'm going to shoot some film at your wedding? Do they ask for that? Do you promote it, or is it just something you do while you're there, really?
Yeah, it's something I do, and they always love it when I tell them about it as well.
Okay.
I've literally got a little film camera in front of me. Of course I do. My little Pentax.
Oh, you bought the new one? Ah, okay. So Pentax i7 for those listening only. Yeah, fab. How'd you like it?
It's okay. I think it's it's a really good little camera, but the negatives are really small, so you don't get as much detail as a full camera. The flash is particularly good in that, though. Like it's actually really good for like dance floor photos. Gives a really cool effect. But couples have always asked, because they've seen like the little winder, like as you wind it up, it's like they're always like, oh, what's that? And
what's that? Yeah.
Asking questions. So yeah, it's I think it's just been a really fun thing, really. Seriously, in the sense that people have like those little Fuji Instaxes as well at wedding. Pointing shoots on tables. I think film is alive and well in the wedding scene.
We've got one, and we've also got an Instax printer. We sometimes take it along to wedding, and during the dinner, we might print half a dozen pictures off and give them to the couples. And they're only they're not the most sharp or whatever, but they look great. They just love having them around. So, and I love when they put these disposable cameras on tables sometimes at weddings. I love it when the kids get hold of it and they take a picture and they can't work out why they can't see the picture on the back of the camera. It's just brilliant, really. So are you shooting colour, black and white, negatives? What are you shooting?
Yep. So pretty much all colour negative. I bought up some of the last supply of Fuji 400H, which is this gorgeous film. Yeah, it's my favourite by far. So I'm currently on my last couple of boxes of that. So quite sad. But yeah, I've got a few rolls of Kodak Portra as well. That's like just experimenting with different ones. When I was in Japan, picked up a stock that they only sell in Japan, Fuji 100, and that's got really popping greens, really film stock. So yeah, just try and use like a variety of different films now. Just again, always learning, always experimenting.
What's the process when you get some film stock? You don't know what it's going to look like. How do you have to interact with the lab? This is a complete new question. You have to interact with the lab to try and communicate what you're looking for in the final print.
Yeah, so I use a fantastic lab up in Hereford called Exposure Film Lab. And they are just, I'd say, there's like a lab in America called Richards Film Lab, and everyone kind of knows that as the standard in America. And I would say Exposure Film Lab are the standard in Europe, if not the UK, definitely with that as well. So they have two scanners called a Frontier and an Ritsu. Between those two scanners, they have slightly different color palettes. So Matt, the owner of Exposure, he knows how I like my negatives to look, how I like highlight, roll off. Skin tones particularly are very important for me. So he kind of knows what I want. And then when I send him a new film, I'm like, try and get it towards Fuji 400H for me. So he's scanning that, and would usually go back and forward on both the Frontier and the Naritsu. What do you like? What worked here? So that's kind of like how I get an understanding of how a film stock looks for me. Also, how you expose it is important. So if you give it more light, it can take like more of a pastel tone sometimes. It doesn't necessarily blow the highlights like digital would. You get just a softer effect. It's it's really quite nice. So I try and like exposure ramp almost. So one at like shoot the film at ISO 100, ISO 200, and so on.
I was going to ask, do you push process at all? Do you ever sort of shoot a film at 400 ISO that was meant for 100 ISO and things like that?
So I don't do any pushing because I find that kind of muddies the image.
It will, yeah.
I haven't experimented with pushing. I've done pulling on it was that new one from Harman Ilford, the Phoenix stock. That doesn't doesn't do what I want. It doesn't look great, that stock at the moment.
Okay, interesting.
But yeah, you can kind of rate film at different ISOs. So say, for example, you've got a 400 speed film, but if you shoot it with the same light as a 100 speed film, I much prefer like the characteristics. You get slightly less grain, a really nice roll off from the shadows and highlights. It's kind of what I'm going for on the film stock.
Sure. And one of the challenges, of course, you perhaps forgive me, Nick, you might not be aware of this, but you can't sort of change ISO mid-roll. You know, if you're going to shoot a film which is at 400 ISO, you're going to shoot it at 100, then you're going to shoot it the whole roll at 100. Otherwise, you're going to end up with lots of badly exposed images, really. It all depends on how you develop the film afterwards. But I guess one of the beauties of shooting negative as opposed to transparencies, you have got a bit of latitude with the exposure. From my experience, when I used to shoot slides, you know, if you're half a stop out, you did ruin the image, basically. It was much more unforgiving because you got that second process of printing after the neg, you know, which you don't get in transparency film. So did you ever do any film work at all, Nick? Did you ever develop films or prints or anything?
As a teen, you know, as a kid, I'd have a little, you know, I had a little camera that parents gave me, but it was, send it off to TruePrint or whatever.
Right.
And you get your photos back. But yeah, no, not in photography. The first camera I had was a Nikon D750. So that was
right.
My entry.
So show my age now, because my daughter's 32. When she was born, I was living in Staffordshire with my first wife, and my mother, the house I grew up in, had a basement cellar, and I was really into photography, and then I had an excuse to get really into it because I got a baby to photograph. So I set up this dark room in my mother's cellar, and I go and see my mother and disappear for 5 hours, which didn't make me too popular at the time. And I only shot black and white. I shot black and white negs and developed them myself, and then printed them. And I'm a scientist. I love chemistry and all that, but to see the print developing in the tray, it is like magic. The first time you see, just, you know, under that red light, the safe light, you see a black and white print start to appear in a tray developing. It's astonishing, really. And the kids of today would love it, you know, because they've obviously not been exposed, again, using that word, to that kind of photography, really. So I think you see what I mean, Geraint? Yeah, you're nodding.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially the first time, but almost every time, it's like that in itself is like science fiction. Just seeing an image come out of thin air.
Yeah, it is, exactly. Yeah,
it's more impressive than digital. No,
it is. I think it's the same reason. You know, I'm in the corner of my tiny little office here, my study. I've got a record player, and I've still got about 300 records, and it's the same thing. It's a much more tactile experience, for want of a better phrase, really, than shooting digital. Really, it's more, you know, you put the record on, you clean the record, you put the arm down. You know, you guys don't know what I'm talking about. You're too young, but
well, actually, I had it was my 50th birthday a couple of weeks ago, so that's when I last saw Geraint, and a friend of mine gave me a vinyl. So I have got some vinyl, which is my father's. So he gave me this record. It's a Portishead album.
Wow.
And I don't have a record player, and I know that was a really insensitive gift, because it's just going to be an entry drug now for me to go into researching all the turntables and work out what to do.
If you lend it me next time I see you, I'll rip it to flak, and you can take it back to you. So anyway, let's go back to talking photography. So one of the challenges to get shooting film, in all seriousness, is there ain't much of it around now. So Kodak, I don't think make film anymore. Fuji have dramatically scaled back, because these days they're a biopharmaceutical company and a cosmetics company, which they are a film manufacturer. So do you find it hard getting film stock, or is it increasingly more difficult? It's certainly more expensive.
Yeah, since Fujifilm have stepped out, Kodak prices have stepped up dramatically. Right. It's quite a shame, really, that they have a monopoly on the colour market currently. And I'm glad players like Ilford have come in with their Harman brand to do Phoenix. It's still got a long way off being a professional product, but it is, you know, it's a step in the right direction. Kodak supply over lockdown was not good at all. It was really expensive and hard to get hold of, even like basic films like Kodak Gold. But now it's eased off a little bit. You can pick up Aperture in a lot more places. Gold, Pro Image. There's different varieties. They even brought back Kodak Gold in 120 format for medium format. Oh wow! So really? That was a step in the right direction, and that can still be had fairly affordably compared to their other film stocks. So,
what sort of prices are we talking about? I mean, I've literally have no idea. How much is a roll of film?
So I'd say at the moment, like a roll of Kodak Gold, anywhere between £11-12 is kind of the going rate, and that's for a standard 35mm roll. In medium format, 120, that's about £9, £10 a roll. You only get 15 images on 645 on medium format, compared to 36, 37 images that you get on 35mm. So yeah, it's roughly the same price, and then the cost of developing as well. So that's
how much is that?
For a roll of 120, and then it's usually about £12 or £13 for a roll of 35mm. It does vary on different places, different like corner shops, 24-hour return window sort of thing. They do it different prices, but then the quality of the scans are also very different.
And are you always getting print and scan? Is that the output you get from the lab?
So I ask them to develop and scan, but they send me TIFF files then, which not a million miles off raw files, really. The dynamic range is really good, and they're quite flexible files. Or they can give you JPEGs as well. So if you're just starting out with film photography, you're just having it on your phone, JPEG is absolutely fantastic. But if you're going to sit down, edit them, resize them, TIFF.
You want TIFFs, yeah. I'm trying not to listen, because on my desk here is a Contax T3, which is a Yashica T3, not Contax. It's got a Carl Zeiss lens. And I've had this camera for about 10 years, and it's still got a roll of Tri-X in it. And I keep thinking I must go out and use it.
You should.
See it? Yeah. It's a nice little camera. It's got like a viewfinder thing from the top, so you can take pictures at waist level. And it's just, I know if I get into it, there's a camera shop here in Bicester called ImageX, and I know Robert listens to this podcast, and he's a proper full service traditional camera shop. So they print, they do retouching and everything else for people. But upstairs, he's got an Aladdin's cave of secondhand cameras, film cameras. And I keep going in there thinking, these are gorgeous. A lot of my cameras I've owned myself in the past, like OM1s and FM2s and all this stuff. And I keep looking at it, it's only 120 quid. But I know instead of it sitting on his shelf, it will just sit on my shelf if I buy it. But if ever you're up this way, I'll take you down there. You'll love it.
Yeah, I'll definitely come to Vista and check out that shop. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Because it sounds like price then isn't a barrier to getting into it. It's not as expensive as I thought. And you talked about those TIFF files, and I've seen those TIFF files that you came back from Japan with. They're just beautiful, really, really great files. If someone's getting into it, someone's just fancies having a go, as a layman listening to you two speak, you've talked about different processes, dual process, screen, is it that complicated? Is there like an easy path through to people? What's the easiest way someone could get into it?
Well, the easiest way right now is that Pentax 17 by Country Mile. I would say in terms of that's going to have parts, that's going to have a warranty. You can't get a warranty on a really old film camera. So that's probably your most surefire way of getting a really good film camera. It's not the cheapest film camera out there, but it's nowhere near as you like a mirrorless camera would be. It's I think around the £500 mark, which it's really good for a 2024 brand new film camera. So that would kind of be like a good starting place. If you are going to pick up a secondhand one, though, by all means, you can get loads of different variety for under that. Like you said, Steve, the Nikon FM2, things like that, they are bulletproof. Old Pentax K1000s. They're really good cameras that just, they keep on going. They're all mechanical, so there's nothing really to go wrong.
Yeah, so there's no electronic. The only thing electronic is the meter, basically. Yeah. So everything else is mechanical. The FM2 was basically a clockwork camera, really. And it was a beautiful camera. The only problem I had is I used to shoot left eye in those days, and you used to have to cock the rewind lever to be able to activate the shutter.
Into your eye.
Stick in my eye. So I sold that one. But if you get into it, Nick, and why not buy a film camera from somebody that's serviced it, because the sort of light seals around perish in time. So what you find, if you're not careful, you'll have quite funky, but probably not what you wanted, images with light leaks all over them. So
yeah.
All right. So you get yourself a camera, you can get yourself some Ilford film or something like that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of processing, can you just go to the one in Hereford or the one in Bicester? I mean, is that a fairly easy process? It would just seem a little bit daunting for me right now to phone up a print shop, develop a lab.
Yeah, of course. I would say going off recommendation is kind of the key thing. I tried a few different labs in the UK. someone from my uni, they'd set up a film lab, and the scans were good. But when I tried with Exposure Film Lab, the scans were fantastic, and emails back and forward were really fluid. And that, for me, I knew that my film was going to be in safe hands. So that's kind of why I'm really happy with Exposure Film Lab. But likewise, if you've got like a local developer, a corner shop sort of thing, there's one down in Cardiff called Express Imaging, and I had a Leica camera that actually had an issue at higher shutter speeds, and they were great because they could, I could give them the roll of film and they turn it around in 2 hours, and that was great to diagnose the issue with the camera. But yeah, that's kind of, there's there's loads of different places you can go and try a few.
And developing your own negs isn't that scary. Well, black and white anyway. It's quite easy to do black and white developing. You don't need darkroom. You use something called a developing tank, and which is just basically a light-proof tank, and you dip chemicals in and stuff. But color processing is a bit more difficult because it's very very temperature sensitive. But a guy that we're hoping to have on the show soon, I know, listen to a guy called Dennis Lee, who lives in the States, used to be a press photographer in the New York area. And they would have to, they'd hear something on the police radio, an event. They'd be out there immediately photographing it. They'd be back into the office, developing the negs immediately, no matter what time of day it was, to have it ready for the morning edition. And it's just a million miles away now from what we do. You can't imagine what the pressure must have been like, really, particularly if you cocked up the developing, of course.
So, question for both of you: when you're both using a film camera, when you're shooting film, what's going through? What's different about how you're viewing the shot, how you're approaching taking that photo compared with a digital photo?
Yeah, I would say it's a slower approach, definitely. And you put a weighted value to each shot. It's going to cost you, about £1 to take a photo sometimes. So you think a bit slower, focus, I find, a bit more on composition, and make sure your settings are dialed in correctly. Like, not all the film cameras I have a meter. So you're using Sony 16, so you're almost looking at like the clouds and the shade and trying to figure out, what your aperture should be. But if it's got a meter, you're making sure it's metered correctly. It's just kind of a slower approach when you're loading the film as well, making sure that it's hooked onto the spool correctly. You're happy everything's sealed and working. I've had times where cameras like I'm experienced with, and I hadn't used it for a few months over winter, and then I just almost relearned the process again. So just doing things slowly, I find, is the key. That's helped improve my digital photography as well.
Yeah, I bet. I was going to say, it must do.
Yeah.
So it's a much more intentional, thoughtful approach. And I get that. You are applying you're translating into cost for each time you press that button. It's going to cost you. And so you want to get it right. Which is no bad thing. It's opposite. It's spraying, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. I think I used to shoot like thousands of images on digital. And don't get me wrong, I still take far too many, and I'm going through them trying to sort out the best ones. But I'd say now I shoot a lot less because I have that kind of weighted approach in my mind that let's do this properly in one shot.
Geraint, where do you see your business going over the next few years? Do you still see film being a major part of that? And where do you hope it to be, say, in 5-10 years' time? Where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, definitely. I shoot film for me. That's kind of the mantra, and I think it's great that couples have embraced it as well. The fact that they love it and that they love that included in my product. I don't think film's going anywhere particularly. It's nice to see Leica brought out a M6 reissue a few years ago. Mint have worked on bringing out a new Rolly film camera, 35 AF, and that looks fantastic.
Didn't know that. Wow.
Like a really old film camera, but it's got a LiDAR scanner for the autofocus. It's awesome. The fact Pentax are working on a 35mm model right now. I think it's here to stay, film. I think that the dark days of like Kodak's bankruptcy are far behind us now. So fingers crossed. But it'll definitely stay in my business. And if it doesn't work for business, I'll still be doing it as a hobby.
And I guess it's like vinyl records, isn't it? That when CDs first came in, everyone thought that's the end of the industry, and a lot of these companies wound up, and then suddenly there's a resurgence, and once there's the demand there, then presumably there is going to be more variety of film stock at a cheaper cost and easier to develop and everything else.
I know what you're going to be doing next week, Nick. You're going to be buying a turntable and a film camera.
Yeah.
He's a Bristolian. He's a hipster.
I'll have my sourdough bread next to it and my flat white.
Right, it's been great catching up with you and finding out more about what you do. Where's the best place for people to find out more about your work and see more of your images?
Yeah, sure. So my website is geraintroberts.co.uk and my Instagram is Geraint Roberts Photo. So yeah, feel free to connect with me on either of those channels or on Facebook. But thanks for having me on the show, guys.
And please hang around while we finish off the rest of our chat, and feel free to chip in as you see fit. So, are you tempted, Nick? Seriously, are you tempted?
I'm interested. Let's say I mean, it's more interesting to me than brass rubbing. Say, so I it is more likely than that. And I have got a couple of film cameras, but I'll have to get Geraint to take a look at them next time he comes over. Because they were inherited from my uncle, so I don't know if they work, if they, if they're any good or anything else. So
the first wedding I ever shot was on film. It was my brother's second wedding, actually, and he said, "Would you do my photos?" And I borrowed a Branica medium format camera, and it was great, and loved it. Digital was only just really coming out then, so but thinking back, it was probably a high stress thing to do, photographing your brother's wedding on a film camera, but still.
But like we said before, Steve, it's what interests me in it is doing something that's outside your comfort zone, something that's new, and just getting out of the kind of treadmill of doing what we always do, and anything that does that, I'm well up for. So I might have to borrow a roll of film. That's all.
You can't give it back afterwards.
I'll say that for both of you.
Go ahead, go on. Yeah.
Your film cameras, though. So you said about your Yashica T3 left on your desk, and Nick, that you've got small film cameras. If you don't use them, they do seize up, and then you have to have them serviced. So
that's a good point.
Please use them, otherwise they will just die a death.
I'm going to use it tomorrow. Scout sauna. So
good. Inspired.
Let's go on to look at what's going on in the industry. I got quite excited this morning, so I got an email from Sony saying new product announcement 5:00, and I thought, what's this? Is it going to be the 2470 f2 or new camera or something like that? And it was earbuds.
Don't talk to me again about earbuds. Man, I can't get away from them.
But what I think would be interesting to chat about, and we've mentioned it already, actually, it seems like at the moment everybody's shooting Leica. Everybody I know is either dabbling with Leica, tempted by Leica, been seduced by Leica. And it seems like they're making some kind of massive resurgence. I know they've always been there, of course, but am I unique in seeing that?
No, I've seen this. I've seen this as well. And from what they've done recently in terms of moving on to industry type news, that they've got this M11D, this new camera, and where that came from was it's the Leica MP, their film camera. All of the things that Geraint just talked about in terms of the way it shoots. People love that way of shooting, that immersive, much more insightful, thoughtful way of shooting with film. So they've created this digital camera. It takes that aspect of photography, but avoids all the hassle of film. So it's got like a 60 megapixel sensor, hasn't got a screen. So where the screen is just basically an ISO dial, no screen. So you can't review images, but you don't have the hassle of processing and film stock and so on. So, but it's I think $6,000 or $7,000. So
it's £8,100. I just checked it out before we started for a body only. It sounds like you got the worst of both worlds to me.
I wonder if in Leica HQ they're thinking, I've got this great new idea for a product, and everyone else saying, you're insane, that no one's ever going to buy that, and everyone does, because they just seem to have a following that transcends all of logic in some ways. But if that's what makes people take brilliant photos, then it's done its job, hasn't it?
I guess so. I mean, in that camera, the sensor is the same as you get in the Sony A7 R5, Sony A7C R, which is like $3,000. It's exactly the same sensor, and you could argue for a more functional camera. But I guess it's all about the experience, the brand. Why people buy Rolex watches rather than Casios or dare I say even Apple watches. Have you ever shot a Leica, Geraint?
Yeah, so I've got a 1960s Leica M4.
Oh wow!
And that is gorgeous. It's a fantastic camera. But that is currently off for servicing with a company called Camera Works. So that's a 6-month wait to have it fixed.
Is it? No way.
Yeah, it's having a full CLA. The shutter at 1/1000th doesn't work correctly. All my some of my holiday photos that were taken at that shutter speed got ruined. So that's a sore subject. But other than that, the camera is like perfect mechanically. I've also got a Leica MA, which it's just like a Leica MP, but without the light meter. So it's a complete mechanical, no electronics or batteries. So yeah, I love that camera. It's absolutely fantastic. But I may sell it when the M4 comes back from servicing.
So given that Steve's Sony rumor was not very interesting, Geraint, what do you think is next for Sony in terms of what they're going to bring out? You're normally pretty good finger on the pulse wise.
Yeah, really happy with the new 85 1.4 GM Mark II. That has been a fantastic lens.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's been great. What will Sony bring out next? There's rumors of a pancake lens coming out at 28mm 2.8. So that would be good.
It would, yeah.
28mm has been a really popular focal length on Fuji.
When's the A75 due to come out? Is that next year? With
Q1 next year, I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, probably, I'd say, for next wedding season.
Yeah.
The thing is, still such a compelling camera, even if against like that Nikon Z6 III or whatever it is, or that Canon R6 Mark II, I'd still pick a Sony A7 IV over those cameras.
Well, that's what I've heard about. Is it whether the sensor size for the A7 V, are they going to stick with the 33, or are they going to go more towards what is it? Is it the Nikon that's got like a 45 or a 60?
Well, the Nikon that's 6 Z6
24.
It's 24, but it's like a semi. It's like half a way towards an A9. It's got a semi-stack sensor. That's a big thing about it, really. Which I assume it's a Sony sensor. You know, they're all Sony sensors, apart from Canon cameras, aren't they? So whether Sony will have something in their next generation camera, which is that sensor, or a bigger version of it, in terms of megapixels, be interesting to see, really, won't it? Yeah.
Interesting to hear about the 85 though. That's certainly on my list. I think probably next year for the next wedding season, I'll be picking that up. That new 85.
It's so much lighter than I thought it was going to be. It's really, for extended periods when you're holding it during speeches, for example, it is fantastic. It's a lot lighter, so much quicker to focus. Tack sharp as well, even at 1.4. So for me, it was a worthwhile improvement over the...
Oh, absolutely. There's not many lenses where you can think, or I think, this is going to make my life a lot easier. But I think that's definitely one, because that version 185 is so slow. It's
try not to listen, because I've got the Sigma, which is a perfectly fine lens, and as we've said before on this podcast, we are slowly winding down our business over the next couple of years. But I'm tempted by that, I must admit. I am tempted by the 85. Yeah,
I had a second shooter. He has the Sigma 85, same as you, the art one, and it's you are splitting hairs really against both GM models. The Sigma is fantastic. If you've already got any 85. Any modern one is probably just fine.
Probably right, yeah. Don't tell my wife that, though, will you? From a techie point of view, so we do like a 10-minute tech focus. We've done a lot of tech stuff already today, and we've got a couple of topics down. So you've got one down, Nick, of different RAW compression formats. What is it you meant by that?
I was interested. Yeah, I was just looking at how RAW compression works, and some of these platforms that compress your raw files to something decent, and it's really clever stuff. Because the problem with any compression algorithm is looking for patterns in the data. So that's how JPEG works. That's how you get such small sizes, and then you decide whether you want to chuck away. Once you re-encode it, whether you chuck bits away or whatever.
It's like an MP3 file, same
exactly.
kind of thing. Yeah.
But you have to find where it's FLAC and stuff. It's lossless, so that it can reproduce. It's exactly the same bit for bit. Yeah. MP3 has got a negligible. Negligible reduction, same with JPEG versus TIFF or whatever. What they do with RAW compression is, the problem with RAW images is that it's got random noise, and any compression algorithm is terrible at random stuff because it can't encode it, it can't find patterns in it. So they have these filters, these software kind of algorithms which are picking that are finding where the noise is, and they're re-encoding that to have much more of the patterns. They're not kind of replacing it. They're not doing anything else. They're just changing the profile of that noise so it's just more regular. And then this algorithm can come through and it can then compress it. And it looks like they're getting down to half the size. I know Rawsy as a platform.
Rawsy's the one I know, yeah.
Which had this same sort of technique of re-encode the noise and then you can really squash it to about half the size with negligible, reduction in quality. The bit where you re-encoding the noise does. I know Rawsey always said it was like a 125 ISO image compared with 100. So it's making the whole image slightly noisier, but at half the file size. When you've got 200 weddings in your archives, that's a decent trade-off. I would say.
Anything you use at all, Geraint?
No, I shoot. I think it's lossless compressed on my Sony A7 IV and now my A9 III. No, I can't think of any. I don't use Rawsey or anything like that, or don't convert to DNG. I've never really seen the benefit.
I'm not really sure what Rawsey you're up to at the moment, because they've been closed for a while for new subscribers. Whenever I look on the website, so I don't know whether their servers or whatever just doesn't have the capacity for more, and they're changing infrastructure or what's going on there. But
and if they went out of business, does that mean you can't open their files? Or are they just normal raw files once they've been processed?
As far as I'm aware, yes, they're normal.
Okay, because that would be a worry to me.
DNGs, yeah.
Does it convert them to DNG?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm having never used it. I'm not sure, but but it's not a platform that you're locked in at all. You run it, and it chunters away, and then it spits out your smaller raws.
Well, if this is something you know something about, dear listener, then let us know. We'd love to hear from you, really. Absolutely. So I have this problem because I use an A7R4 as well, and every raw file from that is about 120 meg because it's 61 megapixel sensor. But hard drives are pretty cheap these days, really. And, I've got lots of sort of 4 terabyte portable ones that I just archive stuff to. And they've only ever been switched on a couple of times. So hopefully they're not going to spontaneously stick and burst. I know, tempting fate, of course, but I've always got 3 copies of everything anyway.
Yeah, so. That's the thing. It's just a double up, isn't it? I mean, I needed a drive last year sometime. I knew I had loads in the cupboard, so I thought that's data that I don't need anymore. Got them all out. None of them worked. About 8 hard disks all packed in. Yeah.
Oh wow! Oh god! Don't tell me that then. Okay.
that was the point that I moved to SSD as my backup system.
Yeah, no, same here. Yeah, I haven't said I only keep RAWs for a couple of years. I don't keep them any longer. I keep them only because sometimes you'll get a phone call saying, Granny passed away this week. You've got any more photos? And you just try and help, don't you? In that case,
yeah. But, I think Geraint's the same, aren't you, Geraint? In terms of keeping RAWs, you keep for a certain amount of time and then just use JPEGs.
I've got everything going back since 2017.
Why have you?
Yeah, I've got the WD MyDisc Duos, I think, or MyBook Duos, something like that. And they have 2 drives inside them, and you can either pair them in RAID 0 or RAID 1. I've got like a few sat right in front of me right now. The latest one I think is like 36 terabytes. So that usually works for me for about 2 years at a time. So I'm currently 2023, 2024 drive. And then next year I'll pick up another one that'll be my 2025, 2026 drive. And that works for me to archive stuff on. But I've got little Samsung T7 Shields SSDs to work off.
And in terms of other Tech 10 stuff that we had, we were going to talk about briefly around, should I always shoot wide open? So when you've got a 50mm lens, 1.2, the temptation is to bang up wide open at every opportunity.
Yeah, this was my point. So I've just been editing a wedding that we did a few weeks ago, and it was a marquee reception. So a lot of it was outside, even though the weather was dire, but still. And just for fun, because, again, trying something different, I got a 24-105 f4 out, which I don't very often use. I thought I'd just use one camera, one lens for a while, really. And there was just something about shooting an f4, because the temptation is when you've got 24, 35, 85, 1.4, 1.2, even with the 50, you just shoot everything wide open, don't you? Because you can. And I just looked at the images and I just thought, because we're mostly documentary style photographers, looking at people talking and interacting and laughing and doing, it just looked a bit more natural, really. Because we don't see the world in very shallow depth of field.
That's right.
So I just wonder, just because, obviously, if it's a wedding in a coal mine, you have to shoot everything wide open because you need the light, don't you? But I just think sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of saying, I've got this super new 51.2, I'm going to shoot everything at 1.2. So that was my thought. What are your thoughts, guys?
Well, I think I totally agree. I think the temptation is a bit of a trope, isn't it? Just go into shallow depth field because it does get you out of a hole. You can take a shot of almost anyone in any situation, in any background, really shallow depth of field at 1.2, it's going to look pretty good. But then what you're doing is just capturing 500 different portraits of people, and you're not really surveying the scene. When we talk about film photography, being a bit more thoughtful about it, thinking about, right, what's the story being told here, and making sure that everyone that's in that shot is part of that story by being in the focal plane.
Yeah.
And that does need people to stop down a bit. And something I've tried to do the last couple of years is think about that, and not worrying about ISO, which is the thing that is always usually in our back door of making us kind of go wide open. Don't worry about that, because people don't care about that, but people do notice when the granny's just out of focus. But if there's, if everyone's sharp and it's a little bit noisy, people don't really care about that.
I think that's right.
That's my experience.
Your thoughts, Geraint?
I think the iPhone has influenced all of this. The fact that we're on a 24mm lens, 28mm lens, and pretty much everything's in focus unless you bring it close to something. You only have to look at quite well-known and respected photographers, Holly Clark, Benjamin Wheeler, Jose Villa. They're shooting a lot wider and a lot more depth of field than they used to. Whereas before, it was all 51.2, lots of nice bokeh. Now they have a wider approach. And I genuinely think that is influence from mobile phones, because people are seeing everything in focus.
That's a great point.
Absolutely right. Did I mention this before? I was talking to someone. If it's on here, then you can just put me down, right? Because I've just had a scene.
As if we would.
But someone was saying that because just following what Geraint was saying there, that when they took a shadow, the reason they didn't like some of the photos that were delivered from this photographer, they delivered back to the client. The client didn't like them because they looked like iPhone photos, and it took him a while to work out what they meant. And what they meant was it was really shallow depth of field, like they just use a portrait filter. So people are seeing that shallow depth of field as being a negative thing now, because it just makes it look like you're in portrait mode on your iPhone. So it's kind of come up completely full circle. It's crazy.
Yeah. You see, I think shooting. Go on, after you. Go on.
Sorry. I think it'll come full circle again, that people will go back to wanting that natural bokeh, because that's what professional photographers did X amount of years ago.
Yeah.
I see basically if you just choose your cam, stick there, and just it'll come back around eventually.
And be consistent, of course. Don't keep flipping back and forth. And do this. So I love shooting everything on 24. My go-to setup is the 24 on the A7R4, because I know I can crop if I need to on that one. But I just like the field of view of 24, because I like to get up quite close to people, listen to people's conversations, because I'm going deaf, but also because I'm nosy. But also I can get, I just love the sort of inclusive feel about that sort of wider lens. And stop down an f4, even f5.6, even f8 if necessary, really, just to get that sort of more feeling of being there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I use the 20. Sorry, I use the 24mm a lot for the danceful photos. I find that is
completely
the best photo for getting everyone in the frame, and it's a great
lens. The Sony 24, it's a brilliant lens. So.
I'm finding my go to Geraint would know, my trusty 7200 is just a bit of a habit, really, and it's almost like when you see 7200 photos, especially at the long end of that, you can just see the social anxiety of a photographer, because you know that they just don't want to get close to the action. And actually, getting on a 24, going 24 and 85, which I do more frequently now, is just a much more immersive shot. You are right in the action, aren't you? And you haven't to get
completely. Closer. Yeah, completely. I don't have a book of the week this week, unless you've got anything, but I do think of something in terms of kind of a film, and it was what we were talking about earlier. Did anybody ever see the Netflix film called Kodachrome?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's about a journey in the States where I think his dad was dying from memory, and he got a roll of Kodachrome. Now, Kodachrome, Nick, used to have a very, very, very unique processing method called K18. Most slide films are shot on use something called E6, but this was shot on Kodak's own proprietary processing, and only Kodak could process it. And it very quickly was one of the first things that sort of stopped in film world, because it used quite a super nasty chemicals. And this whole film was about basically getting to the one lab that was left in America that could still process Kodachrome while the guy's father was still alive. It's a great film, actually. It's not about photography. It's about the relationship between the father and the son, really. But it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. I will check
that out. Yeah, that sounds up my street. The film I saw, which we talked about previously, was Lee.
I've seen it now.
Saw it a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely loved it. A stellar film. Really recommend it. So it's about Lee Miller. I think it's Miller. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, Lee Miller. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's also got Adam Sandberg in it, directed by Ellen Kuras. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it's about this sort of socialite model for Vogue back in the pre-war time, who went into photojournalism during the war and faced the barriers of it was just something that women couldn't do. So she had to pretend to be a guy at one point, put her hair away and that sort of thing to get close to the action. But what was found was that being a woman, she had a very different view of it. She was looking at the scene in front of her and some of these, real frontline scenes and just having a completely different view to seeing things that a lot of the male photographers at the time would have missed. She was also instrumental in, because this is something I didn't know. I don't know if I was being a bit thick, but when the war was won, it wasn't really known about the horrors of the death, the concentration camps, that was, and it was her, she was one of the first journalists to go in and take photos of the horrors there and trying to communicate.
Dachau, I think she went to. Was it Dachau? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and none of the photos. So she brought back. She was working for Vogue at the time. They didn't print them, so that they wouldn't publish it because they thought, no, it's not in public interest. Bit too dark and depressing, which she was absolutely furious about, and that's how she sort of fell out with Vogue. But no, brilliant film, really loved it.
I've listened to a podcast about it. So I'm Addicted to the Rest is History podcast, and they did a program of that. Have you seen that, Geraint?
No, I haven't. No, Lee is a film that we definitely want to watch, though. Yeah, I do want to go and see that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't remember the last time I went to the cinema, so there's a good reason to go. Really, I know Samantha wants to see that one, so
yeah, that's good.
We'll go perhaps when she gets back from Florida.
Yeah, gonna go see Joker next week, so that should be good.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. So, what the movies or?
Yeah, go to the cinema and see that. So we saw Beetlejuice a week or two ago. That was good fun. It's just like the old one.
Is it really?
Just as weird.
Wacky films, yeah. Anything else we want to talk about, guys, before we wrap up?
No, I think that's good. That's good.
So what we doing next week in terms of a guest? I know I'm relying heavily on you getting the guests at the moment, Nick, but not next week, next
we
show.
We have got, well, I think the next record, because this was a week early, the next record we have Tesney Ward, and she is a fantastic landscape photographer, and so that's going to be really interesting. So she's got some beautiful work, and we're really keen to talk to her about that. So
isn't she an Olympus ambassador as well?
That's right. Yeah, so she's an OM ambassador. So looking forward to that one.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much for listening to us, folks. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the show, to give us a review on Apple. I think Spotify, you can review us as well. It does help us in lots of kind of weird and wonderful ways. And make sure you subscribe as well, so you'll get the show coming into your podcast app automatically. We do have a Facebook group just called, surprisingly, the Photography Pod. So, you get a chance to hang out in there, meet other photographers, ask some questions of the group as well. What I've been guilty of doing the last couple of weeks, Nick, is not letting you say goodbye. So I'll let you say goodbye.
I don't want to now. All right, goodbye. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Geraint, thanks for being with us again. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, dear listener. We'll talk to you soon.